Do you play or run D&D and other TTRPGs? Have you ever wanted to play with your normal friends? Do you worry that people will find the game too difficult? That no one would embrace the role-playing side? That it'll be a disaster and you'll entrench your position as a nerd among these people forever? Well, that's incredibly specific. But it's your lucky day, as I ran a game of D&D for a group of non-nerds and lived to tell the tale. My name's Rich, and this is Project Skythorn. So it's fair to say I had a few preconceptions about the non-nerds in my life. I thought that people would find Dungeons & Dragons too weird and too difficult. When all you've played is Monopoly or Mousetrap, the idea of games being prescriptive is really quite strong. There's a narrow range of things you can do, but a whole load of stuff that you can't. In Monopoly, the players can't form a collective and use their combined financial power to overthrow the capitalist machine of the banking sector. For that, you need Communist Monopoly. Link in the description. It's sadly not as mainstream as it should be. But yeah, the difficulty of conveying to the players that they really can attempt anything in D&D was something I expected to be quite a challenge. I was also worried that no one would embrace the role-playing side. I've had this happen in more experienced groups before, and while it's not a game killer, it's still not my preferred way to play. I found that the best sessions are those where everyone at least thinks about what the character's going to do, and they actively engage in the scenario that I've made for them. Lastly, I fully expected that it would be a disaster, and that I'd cement my impression among these people as just a massive nerd forever. Sadly, there's not much I could do about that last part. I just have to wait and see. I'd love to hear about your experiences of running games for your non-nerdy friends and family. Did you have the same preconceptions as me? Well, ahead of time, I was able to check in on everyone's preconceptions. Some people thought it was like a computer game. Some people thought it was like extra complicated chess. And while they both sound fun, it's a bit wide of the mark of the game that I like to play. For me, the heart of tabletop role-playing games and what makes them so different to board games is that they're mostly conversations, which can then turn into stories that we get to tell together, and nobody knows how they're going to end. It seems that the fastest way to help people feel comfortable and to let their guard down at the table a bit, it turns out to be goblin voices. While part of the reason for doing that is it's a lot of fun for me. It's also about me as a DM kind of leading the way and sharing what acceptable behaviour at the table looks like. A silly voice within the first couple of minutes of playing is a really great way to break the ice. The main NPC for the session was a high elf noble sorcerer called Leonidas. I may or may not be currently working my way through the Aerois campaign from High Rollers, so I may or may not owe Chris Trott an apology for stealing his Lucius character completely wholesale. Right down to his vocal affectations and being desperate to find his daddy. I'm very sorry. This NPC is also about showing some in-character roleplay, and he reacted to the players and showed how the social parts of the game can be played. Now, I'll admit, the story that I ran was entirely a railroad. There was only ever one route through the dungeon, there was only ever one way out, but I made sure there were lots of different ways of solving the problems. So the crazed feral giant rat, you could get past that with combat, or as one player did, they said, no, I want to try and pet it. And somehow rolled a natural 20 on their animal handling, and so I had to improvise, and now Ratigan, the trusty feral rat, is an important sidekick. I made sure to share the spotlight between players and encouraged them to share the spotlight with in-character moments between each other. It's a skill that definitely takes some time to develop, but it was so cool to see the beginnings of fun role-playing within the group that I didn't need to do a thing to encourage. Each class in D&D has something that they're uniquely good at. Giving a rogue an opportunity to pick a lock or a barbarian the chance to kick down a door is a great way to get the players leaning into their archetypes. Something I came across after I ran the session was the concept of selling. This is where, as a DM or a player, you can emphasise the actions of another to make them feel really impactful. Pro wrestlers are particularly good at this. If a player character does something interesting, say they roll a natural 20, and maybe have the enemy go, "Oh, impressive, but you will still die," and maybe have a minion run away from them at that point for being extra scary. Or if they roll a 1, maybe extra enemies would attack them next turn, or an NPC would shout, "Ah, fool, you can't even hold a sword!" There's a really good blog by PhD20, which I'll link in the description, which has a really good breakdown of all of this. If we hadn't been playing a one-shot, this philosophy could also apply to a longer campaign. There's few things that warm my evil little Dungeon Master heart than letting the players find out the consequences for their actions. Maybe a session, maybe 10 sessions later, when they think they've gotten away with something, but the consequence is to come back and bite them. It's wonderful. So what happened in reality? How did it actually go down in my session? Well, the mechanics were picked up really quickly by everyone. By the end of the session, everyone was happy rolling their d20s, and the only parts that maybe got a bit slow were when people were sort of looking on their character sheets, trying to find the right stat. But that happens with all my in-person groups anyway, so there's nothing really new there. They weren't a long way behind by any stretch of the imagination. Everyone embraced the roleplay as well to a greater or lesser extent. One player even figured out their full backstory ahead of the session. Now, DMs shouldn't really have favourites, but yeah, this player, totally my favourite. There were a few moments of, ooh, what would my character do in this situation? And that was just wonderful to see. So yeah, it turned out awesome. And it entrenched my reputation among these people as a massive nerd forever, but I couldn't be happier about it. And we're playing again next week. I would love to hear your experiences of playing with your friends, with your family. How did it go? Was it everything you hoped it to be? Was it weird? Was it awkward? Please do let me know. I'm really curious. I've also linked my session notes either as a web page or as some markdown for all you Obsidian fans. So yeah, if you fancy running this for yourself, go for it. Have fun. And again, let me know how that goes. I'll catch you next time. Cheers.